In the bustling old city of Tyre, the air was thick with the scent of the sea and the hum of life. Merchants called out to passers-by, selling spices, cloth, and treasures from distant lands. Yet, in a small, quiet workshop at the edge of the marketplace, Rami sat alone, his hands moving with practiced precision over a delicate piece of jewelry. Each gemstone he handled, every thread of gold he wove, felt like a link to a world he no longer fully belonged to. A world that had lost its warmth the day his wife, Alia, died. Years had passed since Alia's laughter had filled their home, and though time had softened the edges of his grief, it had also hollowed him. His heart had grown cold, like the precious stones he worked with, and he had resigned himself to a life of quiet solitude, creating beauty for others while his own life remained empty. That was until she walked into his life. Samira stepped into his shop on a late afternoon, carrying with her an air of quiet grace and a small wooden box in her hands. Her hair fell in waves, streaked with the light of the setting sun. "I have something," she began, lifting the lid of the box and revealing a gemstone. It was unlike anything Rami had seen in years. Deep, royal blue, with flecks of gold sparkling within, as if the night sky itself had been captured within the stone. "This was given to me by my husband," she continued. "He passed 3 years ago, and I'd like to have something made before his memorial. Something special to remember him by." There was something about the way she spoke, her voice steady, yet tinged with sorrow, that resonated with him. She had loved deeply and lost just as much. They spoke briefly of designs, of the kind of piece she envisioned, and he agreed to the work. As the days passed and Samira returned to the workshop for updates, their conversations slowly drifted beyond the task at hand. Rami found himself lingering in their conversations, asking questions that had little to do with jewelry, and every now and then, he would have to stop himself from staring at Samira. Slowly, Rami, who had long closed off his heart to the world, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. Samira also began to linger in the shop, watching as Rami worked. Rami shared stories of his youth, of how he had met his late wife, Alia. They had a beautiful marriage, but her life was unexpectedly cut short 5 years ago by an unfortunate illness. Samira, in turn, told Rami about her late husband, Darius, a merchant who had traveled far and wide, bringing her treasures from across the seas. It was on one of those travels that his ship had been wrecked in a storm. They were two people bound by loss, yet in their shared grief, they found an understanding, a mutual respect, and eventually, something more. It was during one of such afternoons that Rami confessed his own fear. "I still see her in my dreams sometimes," he murmured one evening as he worked on the gemstone. "I mean, Alia. I loved her with everything I had. And now I'm afraid that if I let myself feel something, I'll forget her." Samira's eyes softened as she listened, her heart echoing his pain. "I know," she said quietly, her hand resting on the workbench between them. "I feel the same about Darius. Sometimes I think that if I move forward, it means I'm leaving him behind. But the truth is, he's still here, with me, just as Alia is with you." Samira could tell Rami cared for her just as she cared for him, but she would never push him to consider her as more than a friend. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared grief, fear, and flickering hope filling the space between them. Then Samira finally met his eyes and said, "Love isn't something that replaces what was there before. It's like your work, Rami. Each piece you craft is beautiful on its own, but that doesn't mean the ones you made before have lost their value. They all matter, they're all precious." Her words sank into Rami's heart, like rain on dry ground. He had spent so long fearing that moving on would mean letting go of Alia, but now he realized that his love for Alia would always be a part of him, and that didn't mean he couldn't make room for someone new. Soon, the necklace for Darius's memorial was completed. It was a masterpiece. Delicate threads of gold intertwined with the blue gemstone, catching the light in a way that made it seem alive. Samira wept when Rami handed it to her and finally placed peace in an intricate box. As she held the box, a hint of worry crossed Rami's face. "Samira," he said shyly, "will you still come visit?" His tone was cautious. Samira looked up, her expression softening. "Yes, I will," she replied, her voice sincere. "I quite enjoy our time together." A wave of relief washed over Rami, and he felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth. He had not felt this happy in years, and so their relationship deepened. They spent more time together, not just in the workshop, but outside of it as well. Walking by the harbor, watching the ships come and go. One evening, as they stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, Rami decided to take the next step. "Samira," Rami said softly, his voice filled with intensity. "I was afraid I could never love again. But you've brought to life a part of me that was dead. You're strong, compassionate, and more incredible than I can put into words. If you would have me, I would like to stand by your side." Samira's breath caught, his words sinking deep into her heart. She stepped closer, her eyes glistening with emotion as her hand gently found his. "Rami, that means more to me than you can imagine. I was also afraid and so lost, but with you, I feel like I'm finding myself." Rami's heart leapt for joy at the fact that she felt the same way. Then a thought crossed his mind. "Do you think Darius would be disappointed in you? In us?" he asked. Samira gazed at him intently, yet lovingly. "In the past, I would have thought that, but now I know he'd want me to be happy. He'd want me to live. And I believe Alia would want the same for you. They loved us, Rami. And love like that doesn't demand we remain frozen in time." Her gaze became tearful. "We're not replacing them. We're honoring them by living fully, by allowing ourselves to love again." Rami exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding as the last of his fears melted away. He reached for her hand and she took it. "Samira," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion and his eyes welling with tears. "Will you marry me?" Samira looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise at the sudden proposal. But then a beaming smile spread across her face. "Yes!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you, Rami." Their wedding was small but beautiful. They chose to marry in a simple traditional ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. Rami wore a ceremonial tunic, while Samira shone in a ceremonial gown embroidered with gold thread. As they exchanged vows beneath the setting sun, with the sea stretching out behind them, Rami looked into Samira's eyes, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you, Samira, for trusting me with the rest of your life," he said softly. "I promise to cherish every moment, to honor your strength and your heart, and to love you with all that I am." Samira smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "And thank you, Rami, for trusting me with your heart," she whispered. "I promise to stand by your side, to face every storm with you, and to love you more with each passing day." Rami's hands trembled slightly as he placed a delicate gold ring he had crafted on Samira's finger. They sealed their vows with a tender kiss. It was soft, sweet, and filled with the promises of the future they hoped to share. The sun dipped below the horizon as they stood there, hand in hand, their love shining brighter than the stars beginning to twinkle above them. Years later, Rami worked in his shop, focused on shaping a new piece of jewelry, while their 6-year-old son, Kian, sat beside him, watching with wide, curious eyes. "Can I help, Papa?" the boy asked, his tiny hands eager to learn. Rami chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "One day, little one, you'll craft something beautiful. As beautiful as Mama?" the boy joked. Rami laughed and replied, "Nothing is that beautiful." At that moment, Samira walked in, carrying a basket of snacks and their 2-year-old daughter, Lena, in her arms. Her smile lit up the room as she set the basket down, kissed Rami's cheek, and gave little Kian a kiss on the forehead. Rami hugged Samira and Lena warmly, pulling them both close, feeling like the luckiest man in the world. "I wouldn't trade this for anything," he whispered against Samira's hair, his voice filled with love. Samira smiled up at him, her eyes soft. "Neither would I."